I'm Senator David Waters from District 4. Today we'll be holding a meeting of the Commission to Study Offshore Wind and Port Development. Welcome to you all. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is compliance with the state's right to know law. As chair of the commission, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor, result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which is authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All members of the committee and selected legislative staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform and use the public access to contemporaneously watch or listen to the meeting on YouTube and via phone by following the directions and links provided on the General Court website. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting in the Senate calendar. We are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email remotesenate@ledge.state.nh.us. That's remotesenate@ledge.state.nh.us. or call 603-271-6931. 603-271-6931. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, it will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Finally, let's get started by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. And Mark Liberté will call the roll. Thank you, Mark.
All right, Senator David Waters.
I'm here in Dover, alone in this room.
Michael Behrman.
Yep, here also in Dover and also by myself.
Okay. Representative Jane Bolio.
Here in Manchester, alone in my home.
Perfect timing, Representative Catherine Harvey. Let's see if she can get
Can
on.
she hear you?
I know. I'll ask Representative Peter Somcich. I saw him. Representative Somcich.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here in Portsmouth. I'm not shoveling snow right now, but took a break for offshore wind, so no one else is here with me.
All right. Ted Deers.
I'm here by myself in Concord.
Stephen Kuchar.
This is Chris Williams from the New Hampshire Coastal Program, participating on behalf of Steve Kuchar. I'm in my home in Exeter by myself.
All right, let me update that. All right. Diane Martin thought I saw her. Nope. Sherry Patterson.
Good afternoon. I am in a conference room at headquarters and alone.
All right. Gino Marconi.
Good afternoon. I am at the port office in Portsmouth and I am alone.
Diane Foster.
Good afternoon. I am at my home in Durham, New Hampshire with intermittent interruptions from the Littman family.
John Clancy.
Good afternoon. I'm here at the Great Bay Community College representing CCSNH, and I'm alone in my office.
Jim Titone.
I'm here in Seabrook and I'm all alone.
Tony Ginta.
Yes, I am present, home and alone.
Glenn Brackett.
I am present. I'm in my office in Northwood and I am alone.
Vanden Devadia.
Here in my home office and I'm alone.
Okay, John Dalton, President of Power Advisory.
Good afternoon. I'm here in my home in Concord, Massachusetts, and am by myself.
Okay, we'll try this again. Representative Catherine Harvey.
Hi, I'm here in my home in Spofford, and my husband is also in the home with me.
Okay, and I am Mark LaLiberty. I am home by myself in Candia.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, everyone. And our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. They were sent to you this morning in the packet of materials from Cameron Lapine. And so I will take a moment to let you access those. And I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I guess they're approved.
I was going to say, I'll take the dogs barking as an approval, but motion by Jim Tatone. And is there a second?
A second. Vanden de Water.
Thank you, Vandan. And if you had a chance to review them, are there any corrections and additions? And my thanks to Mark for preparing these. And Mark, I think that means we need to do another roll as we ask people to vote to approve the minutes.
All right. Okay, Senator Waters.
Yes.
Michael Behrman.
Yes.
I say yes. Representative Bolio.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Ted Deers.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Sherry Patterson.
Yes.
Okay. Gino Marconi, you weren't here last week.
I'll abstain.
Okay. Diane Foster.
Yes.
Sean Clancy.
Yes.
Jim Tatone.
Yes.
Tony Junta.
Yes.
Glenn Brackett.
Abstain, I wasn't present.
Okay. Vanden Devadia.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Well, thank you all. And so just to kind of sketch out our meeting, we're going to have a presentation in a moment from Gino Marconi. And then under, and Gino, I just want you to know that being called old business has nothing to do with your age. I'm not really sure why it's listed that way, but since I think we'd hope to have your last meeting, I guess that makes it old business. But anyways, and then under new business, we are going to have some discussion of offshore wind state procurements, and John Dalton graciously agreed to give us the big picture of what's happening in the region and what are the pros and cons of doing this and how it can situate New Hampshire potentially advantageously. And then I will present some draft language of a bill that I've been working on, and I'll describe that when we get closer to it. So I think we have a good agenda, and we've been spending the first few meetings with a lot of information gathering, which I think has been very helpful to get us on the same page. And certainly we have more of that will come before us as time goes by. But we're also, I think, going to shift to some important work for the commission and starting to think about what we can do to help attract this industry to New Hampshire and position ourselves in relationship to it. Before we start, just a little bit of an update on a couple of things. I do think that the prospects for offshore wind are looking very good. It is, to me, very significant that GE was selected to provide the turbines for one of the projects down in southern New England, and that is very good about having a domestic manufacturing and supply chain. It also is a good moment in terms of an indication of the confidence of the projects moving forward. I understand that everybody's paying a lot of attention to the Recovery Act that was agreed to yesterday, but what may be much, much more significant to the question of offshore wind and renewable energy is that I've been led to understand that in the larger budget appropriations for various departments, that there were some very significant fundings and policies in there to promote renewable energy. So it's going to take a while, as always, to sort through just what is there. And then also, just a note too, in the unveiling of the energy environment areas under President-elect Obama, that he has affirmed the commitment to double the offshore wind commitment by 2030. So, you know, we have a long way to go for Gulf of Maine, but it does seem to me that there's going to be increasing momentum here, and it makes our work, I think, particularly timely. And what has always seemed to me very timely is to hear from Gino Marconi. He really is Mr. Ports and Harbors and PEASE Development Authority, and, you know, so many things for so many years, looking out for the interests of the state of New Hampshire and its economy through what we can do through the great resource that are New Hampshire's ports and harbors. And that, of course, is going to come very much into play in all kinds of aspects of what offshore wind may bring to the Gulf of Maine. And so I'm really so grateful to you, Gino, for finding time in your busy schedule. I know it didn't work out for last month, but I'm really glad you're here, because it is going to be very helpful to the commission to hear your kind of appraisal of where we're at, what our capacities are, what we're already doing, and how you kind of look to what we can try to advocate for, and what we need to do to have this industry come to New Hampshire. So, Gino, if you want to introduce yourself in any further degree, please go ahead. But I would like to say welcome on behalf of the commission.
Well, thank you, Senator. I apologize for missing the last meeting, but I had some personal issues I needed to deal with, and I think this is an important step for New Hampshire and for the region, and anything that has to do with the maritime industry. We've tried to position ourselves over the years here to get ourselves where we can respond to things. And part of what I'm going to talk about today in my brief presentation is what we've been doing and what we're involved in right now to get our facilities up to capacity. So whenever you want, Senator, I can, I got a PowerPoint presentation.
Please go right ahead. I believe you'll be able to share your screen, and you'll be good to go.
Here we go. All right. Well, I'll apologize first off because my PowerPoint skills may not exactly be let's see. There we go. So anyways, well, thank you for this opportunity. I do love talking about the port. I didn't realize until today when someone from PEASE came over and told me that I'd been here for 25 years. So I like to think I have some institutional knowledge, but a little background on us. We are the PEASE Development Authority, Division of Ports and Harbors. Originally in 1957, the legislature established the New Hampshire Port Authority, and it was a standalone agency until 2001, when we were merged administratively with PEASE. And I say administratively because under FAA regulations, which PEASE operates under, financially, we are totally separate from them. We do not get any financial assistance from them, but we do have access to resources that weren't readily available to us before. And when I say that, I mean the legal department, the finance department, the engineering department. So we have those resources that a small agency didn't have before. But over the years, there's been more responsibilities given to the agency. And so as we stand today by statute, we are responsible for the management and maintenance and operation, and in this day and age, the maritime security of the state-owned deep water port, which is here in Portsmouth, passenger and ferry, commercial fishing and recreation facilities in Portsmouth, Ryan, and Hampton harbors, We permit all of the moorings in the tidal waters of the state, and we place the aids to navigation in the areas that the Coast Guard does not. We're responsible for licensing the river pilots to bring the ships in. We're also the lead for in the state and the state sponsor for dredging projects in the harbors and in the anchorages. And we work in cooperation with the Corps of Engineers. And a couple of little known things is that we are the grantee in the state from the U.S. Department of Commerce Foreign Trade Zones Board to establish and maintain the Foreign Trade Zone project in New Hampshire. And we have a revolving loan fund for the commercial fishermen that we've had here since 1995. But so the focus of today is just to talk about the capabilities of the Deepwater Port. This is a graphic that I borrowed from the Corps of Engineers. It shows the Piscataqua River. And you can see there are a number of terminals that operate on the river. And our facility is in the lower part of it, Granite State Minerals, and we're right next door to, they're right next door to us here at the State Pier. The blue that you see is the deep water channel that goes all the way up to Dover Point. So as I mentioned about the pilots, under federal regulations for any foreign flag vessel or any ship over 150 gross tons is required to have a U.S. Coast Guard licensed pilot on board. But under those federal regulations, the local authority, being the state of New Hampshire, has authority to make more restrictive regulations as long as they're non-conflicting with the Coast Guard regulations. And by statute, the division here is that agency. So any vessel, especially foreign flag vessels, entering the harbor have to have a licensed state pilot on board. We currently have 3 Class 1 state pilots. So, as I said, the focus of what I'm going to talk about is the state-owned marine terminal, and this is what we look like today. This photograph was taken shortly after the construction of the Sarah Long Replacement Bridge. It is the only state-owned facility. It's a deep water facility. We have a draft alongside the main pier at 35 feet. We're a general cargo facility. And I say that by mentioning that a lot of the other facilities are very cargo specific. Like the oil terminal, when they built it, their interest was hooking up the hoses to the manifolds and pumping oil. So the ability to handle a wide variety of general cargoes is limited or non-existent. And we are a public access facility. It's owned by the state of New Hampshire. We're responsible for managing it. And there are some federal laws, one of which is the Ocean Shipping Reform Act that, puts restrictions or limitations that does not allow anyone to discriminate against any types of vessels or cargoes unless they're deemed to be hazardous. So with this photo, I'd just like to point out a couple of things. So when you hear me refer to the main berth, this is the main ship dock here. It's 600 feet long. And then with this dock, I'm just going to point out this little open water area between this section of the dock, because I'm going to talk about that a little later. And then I'll point out where the old Sarah Long Bridge was. This was one of the support piers here, and the bulkhead is here. And so the bridge actually came right across Market Street and then out across the river here. And this was the original rail spur that went to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So as you can see, the original bridge actually came through the property here and caused us some problems when we were trying to move different types of cargo. So as you can see, the new bridge was moved to the north and the new rail comes across here. But during the construction and the relocation, this dock right here, which we referred to as a barge dock, we lost the functional use of that. So it was originally over 300 feet long, and now all we have left here is this 100-foot long piece, and it's about 90 feet from the face of the dock to this support pier. So I just want to make note of that, because I'm going to make some references a little later on to what our projects are that we have going on that affect this. So our primary cargo here over the last few years has been bulk cargo, and it's our two base tenants are Morton Salt and Eastern Minerals. And this is Morton Salt stockpile, and this is Eastern Minerals stockpile. And in fiscal year 2020, we moved 554,000 tons of road salt through the facility. Those are our base tenants that guarantee us our cash flow here, because as I said, we don't get any money from PEASE, but we do not get an operating budget from the state. We're self-funding through these contracts we have with our base tenants. But you can also get another look here in the right-hand corner of the barge dock, and it used to extend further and where the bridge cut it off. So we've got a very little left here to work with. So besides our base cargoes, currently we're working on a project with a contractor, Chinro Corporation, who has the contract to build the super flood base over at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. One of the things as a general cargo facility is we've supported a lot of the construction projects at other terminals up and down the river, and a lot of the projects over at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. So what this photograph here is, we're offloading 20,000 metric tons of crushed stone, which is being put in these two stockpiles. They're trucking in sand, and that's for components for concrete for the project. And then you can see some tanks here by the sand pile, and down here you see another tank. All of the components to manufacture concrete over at the Navy Yard is coming through the facility here. All of the equipment that was brought over to the Navy Yard for the construction project was brought across this facility. The project over there calls for 80,000 cubic yards of concrete. So we're handling the aggregate, the sand, the dry cement, and the fly ash, all part of the manufacture of concrete. We also are involved in assembling the equipment. This barge you see here in the middle is a batching plant to make the concrete, because of the aspects of handling the concrete. Once it's mixed, they have to pour it within 90 minutes. And it's a lot of concrete to be putting on trucks to try to get over into the high security area of the Navy Yard. So they built this concrete batch plant, and these are the tanks that the cement and the fly ash and the water would go in. These other tanks that are on the facility will be put on a deck barge and used to transport back and forth to the Navy Yard from here. This other deck barge you see to the left, that's the deck barge they'll use to put the sand and the aggregate on. They have a portable conveyor system that they will use to do that. We're about, I would say we're not quite halfway through the project. It's a pretty intense project over there, but this is an example of what we do here, supporting all of the other terminals and the Navy Yard on the river. Just to keep everybody awake, we have done windmill projects in the past. These components you see here coming in on this heavy lift ship went to the Granite Project up in northern New Hampshire back in, the project was completed in 2011. and offloaded them at the facility here. These turbine blades were 145 feet in length, which are small compared to what I'm reading are proposed for the offshore turbines. We've also handled other components for turbines. This was the ship that had the nacelles and the hubs and the tower sections for the Antrim project. Again, a lot smaller than what we're anticipating to go offshore. I put this little piece in here because it shows the complexity of moving heavy lift and oversized pieces. We work very closely with the city of Portsmouth. They've just completed this last fall, the Market Street Gateway project. And the city was very understanding about the need to have direct access from the terminal out onto Market Street. And then, of course, the I-95 exit is a half a mile up there. I use this as an example because if we were to bring in anything over the road to be loaded on and go offshore, we would do it similar to this, just in reverse. And then we've also got the capabilities of rail right here going under the Saralong Bridge. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, we've been offloading rail cars with steel that's going over to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard project. So we have direct access to the highway and we have rail capacity here into the terminal at the same time. So we've done a lot of other of heavy lift projects here. This was 2 summers ago. They completed the first phase of their super flood basin project. And you can see that this heavy lift floating crane came up from New Jersey to pick this component up off of the barge and set it into the water to go over to the shipyard. These are some other examples. This is a reactor barrel for a nuclear power plant, Westinghouse Electric. Their nuclear division is up in Newington. And for them to get components like this over the road to another port would be extremely difficult. So we're fortunate that we're here and Westinghouse is here, and the economic impacts of having Westinghouse in the Newington area are extremely important. So as I said in the beginning, I wanted to tell the commission a little bit about what we've been working on and what we have going on. We've got 3 projects. So the first one here is the functional replacement of what we lost due to the construction of the Saralong Bridge. This is we're working through New Hampshire DOT, and it requires Federal Highway Administration approval. So as I said, we had lost 200 feet of the barge dock. So what we're designing here is to add about 142 feet on the north end of the main dock and 60 feet on the south end to give us the replacement for the 200 feet we lost. That'll give us an 800-foot long berth. Coming across here, which was the location of the old bridge, is the bridge support and the bridge abutment here. There has to be some shoreline alteration of terrain to make it contiguous with the rest of the terminal, so we don't have that obstruction in the middle of the yard. It also includes doing some dredging here because the original bridge went across here, and so there's this high spot in the location of the bridge. And then right here, this small dock is our emergency vessel dock. Back after 9/11, when we did working with our port security counterparts, the Coast Guard and other state agencies, and did a threat assessment, we realized that we needed to have a small boat dock within the secured perimeter of the terminal here. So we built this dock here, but as you can see, it's going to get displaced by this addition. So that will be moved over into this location. And then what was part of the bridge project itself, we had originally had a boat launch ramp here for emergency vessels. Part of our threat assessment showed that the only all-tide boat launching ramp in the lower end of the Piscataqua River was on Pierce Island. And for those of you familiar with the south end in Portsmouth, try to get to Pierce Island on Market Square Day, or if the Prescott Parks Arts Festival. So we built a launch ramp there in case there was an emergency and responders needed to bring in additional assets. So they did put in another boat launch ramp here that is used by not only the harbor masters, but Marine Patrol, Coast Guard, oil spill response people. So we're in the process of going into final design on this project. It's being reviewed right now by New Hampshire DOT because it's federal highway money coming through New Hampshire DOT. So this is all being reviewed right now, and we're hoping to get into final design and get the bid documents together to get this part of the project started. The second project that we have, we got a US DOT build grant to rehabilitate and modify the existing dock. So this hatched area here is the main ship dock. And this is that open water area that I pointed out in the beginning of my presentation in the photograph. One of the issues that we've dealt with over the years here is having direct access from the front gate to the side of the ship. So when we were bringing those windmill components across, the ship was here, we offloaded, we had to plan many, many months in advance to make sure that we had open access from the side of the ship around this open water area, and then around the salt pile, and then out the front gate. So by decking this over and making it the same height and the same live load capacity as the pier itself, we'll have the capabilities of coming straight through the front gate to the side of the ship, either to discharge or load any equipment. So this project here involves not only that, but the rehabilitation part is the first 300 feet of this facility was built in 1964. And the second 300 feet was added on in 1977. And which is standard engineering process. Every 10 years, we have a condition survey done on the facility. The piling structure, the support structure is in good shape. There's steel pipe piles filled with concrete and rebar, and we want to extend that life of them. So the plan is to jacket those pilings to prevent the chlorates from the salt water getting in through the steel and corrupting the concrete and the rebar. There is some deterioration to the support structure under the pier, the pile caps and the structural beams, so those need to be repaired and then resurface and redeck the existing deck of the pier. So the state had appropriated $5 million, and we used that as matching funds to get $7.5 million from US DOT to do this project. Currently we have 35% design on this project, and we're reviewing those to try to move those ahead. We would like to get to 100% design by the fall of this coming year, to be able to go out and look for some construction bids. The climate, my opinion is the climate for construction is pretty favorable to us because there's the super flood basin project going on over the Navy Yard. There's a lot of equipment over there right now. The Navy is about to go out to bid on the next phase of their super flood basin. It's an expensive project. Marine construction, it's been our experience that the majority of the cost of marine construction is in the mobilization and demobilization of the equipment. So having a lot of equipment in the area, we believe is favorable to us, getting some good bids on our projects. The third project that we've been working on, and we got good news yesterday coming out of Congress that this project, the language was included in the Water Resource Development Act, and that is the uppermost turning basin in the upper left-hand corner. One of the original slides I showed the blue Federal Navigation Channel. And over the years, there's been several projects completed, like down here, this green one, there's a turning basin that is directly in front of the state pier. It's a 1,000-foot turning basin. It's in between the two bridges in order to turn the ship around. A little anecdotal story is that within 90 days of the completion of the turning basin, there was a LPG ship that coming up the river had lost its steerage. The pilots stopped the ship right there, turned the tanker around in that turning basin and brought it back out to the anchorage. So this project up here was identified in a navigation safety improvement study that was published by the Corps of Engineers in 1987. And I've been working on this since then. The legislature has appropriated approximately $7 million as the state's cost share in that. The turning basin currently is 800 feet in diameter. Our pilots are turning 764-foot long ships in that 800-foot turning basin. The plan is to expand it to a 1,200-foot turning basin and lengthen it out a little bit down towards the south so that as the ship comes off the dock, if there's any current and the ship drifts down, there'll be plenty of room. And it raises the safety level for these ships. So those are the three projects that we've been working pretty diligently on to try to get the capacity and the abilities of the river, and especially our terminal here, the state terminal, to get it in a state of good repair and in a position to handle ships of larger dimensions, carrying more cargo, and be able to handle different types of general cargo and project cargo. With that, I will leave it at a little quote from our statutory charge. We're supposed to plan for the maintenance and development of the ports and tidal waters, aid in the development of saltwater fisheries, and foster and stimulate commerce in the shipment of freight through the state's ports. So I will be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gino. And I'm just wondering whether those rainbows land in a pot of gold out at the Gulf of Maine offshore wind, but we'll find out, won't we?
That's the direction they're aiming, sir.
Well, Gino, thank you so much. And I suspect there are going to be a bunch of questions, and maybe if you could, there we go. And it's going to be a little bit hard for me to see everybody. So if you want to just speak up and ask your question, please just do, and we'll try to get to everybody. So if you have questions for Gino, Peter, I do see you've raised your hand, so go right ahead. Representative Solmschitz.
Yes, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Director Marconi. I just wondered if you, since you're involved with the this commission now, and I'm thinking that you've given this some thought. Do you see anything that we need to be looking at in the way of infrastructure for the next 10 years or so, if we expect to be attractive to the offshore wind industry?
That's a great question, and that's something that we discuss on a daily basis here. I think we still need to look a little bit more at we need to educate ourselves here on the port side as to what those needs are. There's a lot of information out there. I know I've sent some things to Michael and to the senator as I read them that I find interesting. And also statutorily here, we have the Ports and Harbors Advisory Council who have taken a great interest in this project. So we're having a lot of discussions about what is needed. We're looking at what other facilities around the country and around the world look like to try to do a comparison. I'm sure that we fit somewhere in here. To what level at this point, I can't make that determination right now. I think that's also part of what this commission is looking at.
Thank you.
And Diane Foster is the next one I see. Diane.
Thank you, Director Marconi. That was really useful. As a complete aside, my dad regularly reminds me that the 1980s dry dock replacement at the shipyard paid for my college education. He was the lead contractor. So it's great to hear they're continuing to invest. My question though is about dredging. So one of the things we know about offshore wind is eventually there's a connection to the shoreline. And often that's done with cabling underground. And I know that some of the sand dunes in the Piscataqua River can be fairly dynamic. So what do you have for insight regarding how much dredging is done, how much morphologic change occurs?
The tidal currents in the Piscataqua River really do sweep the bottom of the river and keep it clean. There's only one area that is of constant concern that we monitor along with our partners at the Corps of Engineers, and that's an area up just up above Simplex, Tyco, Subcom. It's an area there that it had a sandy shoal that extended partway across the river, and it was removed back in the day when PEASE Air Force Base was built and Department of Defense put in the jet fuel terminal out there. And we refer to it as Simplex Shoal. It's this sandy, almost Cape Cod shaped sandbar that comes across, and every 5 to 7 years there's a maintenance dredge that needs to be done there. Other than that, the only other dredging that may occur in the river for maintenance is at someone's berth. I know that occasionally Sprague Energy has done maintenance dredging at their berth. Other than that, the tidal currents do sweep the river pretty clean. The majority of the bottom of the river is fractured ledge. One of the interesting things, though, as you bring that up, is the uppermost turning basin. You know, we all suspected from the 10,000-foot view that there was a lot of ledge there. When the Corps went in and did their preliminary soundings in there, they used some sonic testing, and then they went in and did actual test borings, and the majority of it is hard packed glacial sand. So it's just packed in there, and it's packed really tight, having been under the weight of the glaciers. But there's been no erosion of that, and their maintenance schedule on the expansion of the turning basin is based on the fact that the original turning basin, they've never had to maintain it because the sand is packed so tight. So I know that other projects around the river doing geotechnical borings, there is a lot of fractured ledge on the bed of the Piscataqua River.
Thank you. And I have one more question. When you are working with new operations, so when you're working with somebody new that's coming to use your port, what are the questions and surprises that they most experience? So what questions do they ask? What are they not expecting? What makes this, certainly the tidal currents are large. Are there other things that arise?
Every question that we get, or every potential cargo we get is different. Right up front though, we work closely and pull the pilots in to make sure that these companies understand the tidal conditions here and the current conditions. We've got 4 docking, undockings in a 24-hour period here, and those only occur at the duration of slack current. And the duration of slack current is only about 45 minutes. So we've got a really small window of opportunity to bring a ship in. When you're talking something 45 to 60,000 deadweight tons, timing is essential there. That's generally the biggest surprise that, especially the ship owners. We get all the ships that we get in here are foreign flag ships, and we have to be very careful and very meticulous about explaining to the ship master these tidal currents. And because of our experiences here in the past, when we get a ship over a certain size, we require them to have a mooring master on board the vessel for the first tide cycle, so that they understand the importance of making sure the brakes are on the winches to the capacity, the holding capacity of the winch. I think one of the things that attracts a lot of cargoes here is the fact that we're half a mile off the I-95 exit, which is, you can go anywhere from here. You can get down to 101 to the Manchester I-93. You can get to 495. That's attractive to a lot of companies that come here wanting to bring cargoes in. The other thing that is attractive to them is that we do have open laydown area here, but it's also been the ability, working with PEASE, 2.5 miles up the road, those windmill blades, when we offloaded them, when they unload a ship, they want to get the ship unloaded as quick as possible, because the demurrage on the ship sometimes could be $65,000 to $80,000 a day. So they want to get the cargo off the ship, which means you get the blades off, you move them off site, and we put them in storage out to PEASE, so that they could, as needed, go to the site of the windmill project. So that relationship we have with them out there has been very beneficial to us handling these types of project cargoes. So there's been a few cargoes that we've had to turn away, and that's primarily because of our physical issues. And that open water area between the south end of the main ship pier that we affectionately refer to as the pond, that's been a pain. And hopefully we get the build project moving along, we deck that over, and that pain will go away.
Thank you.
Well, Gino, thanks so much. And I had wondered whether the funding was included for the turning basin in the budget bills, and that's just great news. I also I have a couple questions. One is about the connection to PEASE, and is there potential for a rail connection there?
I can't speak to that, Senator. I know growing up, I went to St. Thomas Aquinas up in Dover, and there was a railroad bed that went across Spalding Turnpike, but that's been long gone. I know that question came up.
And I was just wondering.
Yeah, that came up a few times, and I'd have to defer to the folks over at PEASE to answer that question.
Then my other question, you know, I think everybody recognizes with the scale of the turbines that are likely to come, that presents all kinds of issues of weight and laydown area and so forth. But I saw that last week the first keel was laying for a Jones Act compliant servicing vessel, and I didn't know what you knew about the size of those vessels, but it looked to me like those vessels would be ones that we would be able to accommodate.
Yeah, I saw that it was it was Great Lakes Dredging Company. They were the ones that got a contract to build a Jones Act compliant ship that would service them. There's been a lot of other companies that are starting to move into that direction. Unfortunately, they're foreign flag boats, but I think the U.S. industry sees the opportunity there and the need for it, which was the point behind the Jones Act to begin with, was to protect U.S. shipbuilding, U.S. shipping, and U.S. merchant mariners.
Yeah. Well, Gino, thanks again. And we're going to move on to some other things in the agenda, but consider this the first time that I'm sure you're going to be presenting to us, and that it's my hope that when the COVID starts to, I see Jeffrey, I'll get to you in just a second, but when the COVID starts to go down, I'd like to renew the effort that Commissioner Caswell and I had discussed about having a kind of a meeting up here for all the folks in the industry to come and have them take a look and tour around, and to do that again and get them to see what we have and get their advice about what we might need to do. So Jeffrey, please ask your question.
Senator, we may need to unmute him.
I'm sorry. I will see if I can find him, or Mark, if you can, Michael, if you can find him.
Is it Jeffrey Dickinson?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, quick question on the improvements plan for the existing port. What will be the live load capacity that you expect that the quayside to have? That was an issue that was highlighted in an earlier presentation on ports.
Good question.
The live load capacity of the pier is 1,000 pounds per square foot. But that's not the end all to be all. I mean, we've handled transformers here that went to the power plant in Londonderry, and those were 365 tons. So there is, for lack of a better term, crane mats, bridging that they can be put down over the deck to handle heavier loads.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you again, Gino, and I really appreciate it. And I think, Michael, we're going to move on now. And
yep, certainly. So switching gears, but again, thank you, Gino, very much for that. Always enlightening.
Doing the introduction for us for John Dalton, I would appreciate it. And John, let me say thank you again so much for all your help over the last few weeks and for being with us today.
Great. So I'll just do a quick introduction for John. John is president of Power Advisory, LLC, and offers over 30 years of experience in the electricity sector. He led a team that advised the state of Rhode Island with the procurement of 400 megawatts from Revolution Wind offshore wind project, has engaged to advise Rhode Island with their most recent offshore wind procurement, and assisted New York State with the procurement of over 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind. In 2019, he led a study reviewing opportunities to participate in the U.S. offshore wind supply chain, has participated in draft regional offshore wind market summaries, assessed viable onshore interconnection points for offshore wind projects, reviewed the benefits and risks of alternative offshore wind transmission development models, and has reviewed the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management offshore wind leasing process before. So certainly an accomplished individual. And John, great to have you here, and feel free to share your screen at your leisure and we can get started.
How's that? Can you,
Yes.
does that work? Great.
Yep.
So thank you, Michael. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts here. So what I've been asked to look at is really to talk a little bit in terms of how state offshore wind procurement goals have impacted the offshore wind market and how they've been used by states, recognizing that, one of the drivers that states are looking to offshore wind, one of the real values that offshore wind brings is essentially a new industry. So there's a recognition of very meaningful economic development benefits associated with the development of this industry. So my first slide just provides a view in terms of offshore wind procurements. So this is basically the process that states use to purchase offshore wind, typically using long-term power purchase agreements. So we can see in this graphic, roughly there's about 25,000 megawatts of offshore wind that these states have targeted. And when you add into this, these are 6 different states running from Massachusetts to Maryland. When you add in the fact that Virginia also is looking to procure about 5,000 megawatts, not really procure, because in Virginia, they're going to have the local electric utility develop the offshore wind projects. So we're talking about 30,000 megawatts of offshore wind to be developed in a relatively short period of time. And to put this into context, the New England electricity market has about 30,000 megawatts of generating capacity. So we're talking about, in a little more than 10 years' time, essentially building on the US East Coast a very large volume of offshore wind generating capacity. And what does this mean? 30,000 megawatts represents about $100 billion worth of capital investment. And this is direct investment. Doesn't reflect kind of any of the spin-off benefits that would be associated with this. So clearly there's a very interesting opportunity here that's captured the attention of many policymakers in many states. And you can see the states that are participating range from Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island to the south, and then New York, New Jersey, Maryland. So there's lots of activity that's occurring here. And I think it's important to understand what's driving this. I've talked a little bit in terms of the economic development benefits, the fact that we're talking about a direct investment of $100 billion in what's probably going to be a 10-year period. And effectively the development of a new industry. And we saw some of the smaller turbines in the previous presentation. These turbines are larger, so you really want the industry to be relatively close. The industry that produces these turbines to be relatively close to the sites where the offshore wind projects are going to be located. So you don't want to be having to, source these turbines from Europe. Essentially there's, significant costs or significant risks. If you're going to have to take ships across the ocean to deliver them to projects in the U.S., absent any consideration of the Jones Act constraints, there's some real challenges in terms of weather risks, and how one would do that. So very meaningful economic development benefits. The third area or second area is really the power supply benefits. And these are very dramatic. These projects have high capacity factors. And a capacity factor is basically a term we use in the industry to measure how often does the unit effectively run at its full output. And the capacity factors that we see for offshore wind are in the neighborhood of about 50%. That's about over 2 times what you're going to see for a solar project. The other really significant benefit is that recognizing that here in New England, we're at the end of the natural gas pipeline infrastructure in North America. On cold winter days, power prices can get very high as electric generators compete with residential customers and other customers that are using gas for heating. So on cold winter days, the output of these offshore wind projects are very high. They typically can be in the neighborhood of about 70% of their rated capacity. So that's a real meaningful benefit. It means that you're able to produce power when it's going to be valued most highly. So that's, real power supply benefit that offers benefits in terms of cost reductions as well as underlying reliability to the electricity system. And then the third area of major benefit are essentially the environmental benefits. The fact that, as we try to address climate change and look to greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies, what are the different technologies, clean energy technologies out there that are available? And offshore wind, given its high capacity factors, really can play a major role in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the region. So with these benefits, policymakers are weighing them and recognizing that essentially there's real value here in terms of offshore wind. And I'm not speaking so much as an offshore wind advocate. I'm a consultant, but Michael talked about the work that we did for Rhode Island, and that was an instance where I had to demonstrate to the state commission that there was economic benefits, benefits to customers from the development of these projects. But if we're going to get this investment, and project sizes range, typically 400 megawatts to 800 megawatts. More typically, we're seeing 800 megawatt projects proposed in Southern New England. This is an investment of about $3 billion. So we're talking about large capital investment. Developers, offshore wind developers, if they're going to make this investment, they require some revenue certainty. They need to know that the power they produce, that they're going to be able to sell that, and that they're going to be able to sell it to someone for a relatively long duration. These are projects that have useful lives of about 20, 25 years. So they're typically looking for contract terms of about 20 years, and they're going to want to have a known price for the power as well as the environmental benefits that they produce. These environmental benefits are typically conveyed in terms of renewable energy certificates or RECs. So the model that we see most typically in New England is the local utility will purchase the energy and the RECs for typically 20-year terms, and they'll then go to the Public Utilities Commission and seek approval in terms of for this long-term power purchase agreement. And this is a structure that we see for offshore wind. We see it for solar in many markets. We see it also for onshore wind. So it's a common structure that's typically been employed. So what are the different state offshore wind procurement goals that we see in different states? Typically, there's 2 different approaches that are used. You see some states have relied on executive orders, essentially where the governor directs the commission or the policymakers to have the local electric utility to procure this power. This is the avenue that's pursued in Rhode Island. In Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, Maryland, more typically it's been legislation that's been passed. And the focus of this legislation is multifold. Typically, one of the elements of the legislation is, as I mentioned, it's basically directing the local utility or local utilities in Massachusetts to, contract for offshore wind capacity. There's also typically a requirement for the utilities to use a competitive process. So they want to make sure that they're going to get the benefits of competition, to make sure that the contracts are priced as low cost as possible, so that they're relying on, effectively relying on competition to make sure that the offshore wind developers sharpen their pencils. And then typically another element of this is that recognizing that it's a long-term commitment and customers are going to be the ones who are going to be paying for this power. They typically have the Public Utilities Commission review the long-term power purchase agreement. And then finally, with an approval by the Public Utility Commission, that essentially allows the electric utility to recover the cost of these long-term power purchase agreements from customers. Couple thoughts in terms of what this means potentially for New Hampshire, if New Hampshire were to decide that this is a path they want to pursue. I think that in terms of the issues that need to be considered are kind of what are New Hampshire's objectives? How should they be conveyed? Typically these relate to, there's an element of timing. When do we want projects to be in service? Is there a time frame that's going to be specified for when the procurement should be initiated and when it should occur? Are there specific locations where we want projects to be? Are we talking about the Gulf of Maine? Are we talking about any federally approved offshore wind lease area? Another element is typically some test to ensure that the power that's going to be purchased is cost effective, right? Does it make sense? Is it in the best interest for customers? Obviously, there's lots of different ways in terms of cost effectiveness can be measured. Typically it's comparing the price of power versus the value of that power. Essentially the price of power being the contract price and the value being reflected in terms of the value of energy that it would produce, as well as the value of the renewable energy credits that would also be produced. Another element that's often considered is in the procurement framework is economic development. How should that be considered? What weight should that be given? Some instances, it's just specified in general terms. In some instances, there's direction that's provided with a greater level of specificity. One thing I think that New Hampshire needs to reflect on a little bit is to get the most cost-effective offshore wind power, you need large projects. Larger projects benefit from economies of scale. There's lots of cost associated with mobilizing equipment, much as we heard in terms of port construction. Same thing with respect to offshore wind projects. So if you can build an 800 megawatt offshore wind project, you're probably going to be able to realize, you're very definitely going to be able to realize a lower cost than a 200 megawatt offshore wind project. So that might require that New Hampshire wants to consider, procuring with other states and, using that as a way to be able to capture these economies of scale and achieve these lower costs. Another thing that needs to be considered is, what's the right amount for New Hampshire to procure, recognizing that, there's, this is effectively a part of the state's power supply portfolio. So, what's an appropriate portion of this portfolio that should be represented by offshore wind? And is it appropriate for there to be multiple contracts, given, this is another risk mitigation strategy that can be used? So these are just a couple of the thoughts in terms of that can be, reflected in terms of, procurement legislation, and look forward to your questions. And obviously, as Michael indicated, I'm an industry practitioner. So I hope that this has been intelligible, and more than happy to answer your questions.
Well, thank you so much, John, and not only for this, but for your help over the last few weeks as we've been trying to look at procurement through the context of developing a language for a bill. And I think so much of what you said, people will recognize in what we've tried to do in the procurement when we get to that in a few minutes. So if you want to unshare your screen, we could I'll be able to see people's hands and see what questions that people want to ask. And really, I think there's an opportunity here to ask John, not only about what other states are doing, and but also more generally the question of what's in it for New Hampshire. And is this doing this, is it likely to help us attract the industry here, or to be able to work with other states and get on board with what they're doing so we get good prices? And so I'm waiting to see hands. And Michael, I don't see any yet. Do you? Anybody? Hands up.
Oh, we do have one.
Jeffrey Dickinson, if you want to unmute him, and go right ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Just a question, do you see other states sort of cooperating in terms of their port development and other activities, or is it kind of a state for a state by themselves? Earlier presentators in earlier meetings have mentioned that, we'll probably have to cooperate with different ports in Maine, different areas to sort of really capitalize on New Hampshire's aspect of the Gulf of Maine. But have you seen cooperation kind of agreements coming up between the states? Thank you.
Great question. I would say that there's less cooperation and more competition. And it's somewhat unfortunate because, the port requirements are so significant that typically one state and one port can't satisfy these projects. So there really is a need for states to cooperate. We're starting to see more cooperation kind of in the mid-Atlantic states, where the three governors there have recently signed effectively kind of a pact to cooperate. There's been less cooperation we've seen here in the U.S. Northeast, but I think that that is something that policymakers are beginning to understand, that there really is a need to work together. And by working together, we can do this, at a lower cost and be better positioned as a region to capture a disproportionate share of these economic development benefits.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, John, and I know it's hard for New Englanders sometimes to get along, and how many times has New Hampshire been at war with Massachusetts, literally back in the colonial days, but more figuratively since. But the Gulf of Maine process is set up by BOEM to be cooperative among the three states, and I think that gives us really an opportunity here. And in Governor Sununu calling for the formation of this task force, I do hope that we will have an opportunity here to take advantage of this kind of cooperation. And people will see when we get to the draft procurement language that it very much does open the door for working on solicitations jointly with other states. So it's a bit down the road, but I think Jeffrey's question raises a good point. And I see Peter is next. Peter, Representative Somsich.
Yes, thank you, Senator. John, I just wanted to add to your comments before about the benefits where you highlighted the environmental, the economic, and the financial. I just want to remind everybody that offshore wind, as does solar, has $0 fuel price, and it will remain zero forever. So we look at energy projects, and you mentioned, for example, the fact that in the wintertime, natural gas prices go up. Well, yes, they do. And one of the nice things about offshore wind is those fuel prices will never go up.
Yeah, that's a huge benefit. And it's one that you're right to underscore. And the other benefit that we see is that as part of this, the fact that you've got offshore wind producing in the winter during these peak periods there's a reduction in the natural gas price because generation, which otherwise would have been provided by natural gas fired generators, is now being produced by offshore wind projects. So gas prices go down to other generators who are still relying on natural gas, as well as to customers who are relying on it for home heating. So that's a very important point, and one I probably should have stressed more. Thank you.
And, you know, and John, it wasn't important here. And, you know, we've heard in other presentations about the shift to a winter peak for demand and what a, you know, as we have increased electrification needs and what a crucial role that offshore wind will play in that. And of course, also the potential for hydrogen storage combined with offshore wind is likely to help a whole lot with that peak shifting and also just with peak, you know, daily peak demand and other uses as well. So there is a lot of good potential with that. And John, I wanted to ask a question related to the economic benefits, and that you know, it is clear that economic benefit is something, development benefit is something of concern, and workforce development, a lot of things related to this that you know, one would want to make, you know, to see as part of what we're looking at in procurements. But isn't it the case that some of the other states, particularly I know most about Massachusetts, but in the leasing process had very significant requirements there for really directing hundreds of millions of dollars in the leasing bids towards workforce development and port development and all kinds of economic benefits as well. And so that is something separate from procurement, but that if we're looking at economic development, that leasing phase would provide that opportunity for a state.
It does. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I think that there's naturally going to be economic development benefits that are going to flow from these projects. You know, there doesn't necessarily need to be a mandate. And when you started talking about Massachusetts, I thought that's where you're going to end up, because different states have taken different approaches with respect to how directive were they going to be with respect to economic development benefits. Massachusetts has been pretty hands-off. They've said, we want to see this industry develop. We're going to be early in the industry. And we think with that, we're going to get more than our fair share of these economic development benefits. And they've seen it in terms of, you know, there are, you know, they've made an investment with respect to the Port of New Bedford. And we now see leases for that port for an extended period of time. So that investment is paying off. And I think that we're going to see, you know, the city of New Bedford in 10 years' time to be in a very different, you know, economic position than it was 2 years ago when this industry was kind of just being initiated. So I think that, yeah, there are, you know, one doesn't need to be overly directive with respect to economic development benefits. A lot of these are going to naturally flow from this industry. You know, you have to service these, you know, these projects over 25-year periods, and you want to be close to them, you know, and that's one benefit that New Hampshire is going to have in terms of, you know, projects that are in the Gulf of Maine. Is that's going to be, you know, a good port in terms of for service vessels.
And Senator, if I could just jump in real quickly and add to that, John, I completely agree. And the additional components that Massachusetts did pursue, however, were a lot of resources put towards reaching out to the industry, providing education, developing business registries, and acting, you know, in creating a network that did help facilitate that. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't necessarily that they were hands off totally, but more so in that way that you described, but did allocate significant resources, New Bedford, you know, other reports and efforts through Mass CEC that did help facilitate the development of the market. So I think there's just a you know, a kind of delicate difference there, but yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, John. And I don't think I see any more hands.
Yeah, we do have two more, Senator. We have Representative Somsich and then Susan Muller, I'll just probably allow Representative Tomsich to go
Muller first, if we could.
first.
Then we'll come back to the
Yeah,
representative.
thank you. So in the context of the workforce issue, I just wanted to kind of throw out the idea, and I think it's pretty obvious, that the marine industry in general, even the fisheries industry, has some interesting workforce opportunities here. They are people who are experienced in working in off the shore of the Gulf of Maine. And as we just mentioned, offshore wind is going to require a lot of workforce to maintain the services for this equipment. And then a question for John again about, you mentioned the capacity factor of offshore wind from 50 to 70%. How do you see the role of battery storage working in the next 10 years? Is that going to be able to push that 70% even higher?
So the capacity factors that I've mentioned are what can be realized, in the waters off Massachusetts. My understanding is that the resource in the Gulf of Maine is superior. So the capacity factors that you're going to be able to realize will be higher still. And in addition, we're now seeing 14 megawatt turbines. GE has just rolled out a 14 megawatt turbine with greater rotor diameters, which are going to be able to capture, higher proportions of wind. And that's going to help as well in terms of enhancing capacity factors. In terms of batteries, batteries have value, not so much in terms of increasing the capacity factor, but, filling in the void when the project isn't operating, or when you have high penetrations of offshore wind, to shifting some of that production to periods when it would otherwise be valuable to have additional clean energy producing. So there's a very clear marriage here in terms of batteries, storage technologies. So as their costs come down, there's going to be a very natural fit between offshore wind and these technologies.
And who is up next, Michael? Michael, you're muted. Was it?
Oh, excuse me, Susan Muller.
I thought it was Susan Muller. If she's
Yep.
there.
Can you hear me?
Tony will be
Yes.
next.
Thank you. Yeah, just on this question of what's in it for New Hampshire and thinking about workforce development, I'm wondering if the commission's looking at recent developments, for example, the state of New York, in that solicitation, one of the developers, I believe it's Equinor, last month proposed a tower manufacturing plant for the Port of Albany, which would be really significant for our workforce if New Hampshire could attract something like that in connection with a procurement. I think that could actually really be helpful in terms of if that was part of the procurement legislation, that might be helpful in getting the legislation passed. So I'm wondering if the commission's looking at things like that.
Well, that's great to have that information, Susan. And we're going to turn to the procurement in a little bit, and that's a very good thought. Tony?
Thank you, Senator Waters. John, if I could ask you for a minute to take a look into your crystal ball. Being a consultant, I'm sure you're asked to do that quite a bit. But as a representative of the Business and Industry Association, something we hear from the members around the table on a monthly basis is New England has the highest cost of electricity in the continental US. And so offshore wind, does it have the ability to lower costs in the long term, keep them the same, or make costs go up? What would you predict?
So I think in terms of the long term, if that's the perspective you're talking about, is it does have the potential in terms of lowering costs. And I think that that's critical. It's the point that was made earlier by the senator, I believe, was that it's a fixed price that you're paying for this power, and what we're seeing in terms of the different procurement processes that have occurred is that prices have been coming down. And the first procurement, the prices were surprisingly attractive. We thought there was going to be a considerable premium relative to the price that was paid versus versus market prices. But people were bid very aggressively, and it resulted in quite a compelling price. And as the technology matures and we get larger size turbines, that provides, and as the supply curve matures as well, that provides greater opportunities for, future cost reductions to be shared, with customers. So I think that, long term, there's a potential for, underlying cost reductions. And importantly, it's cost stability, right? Which I imagine is very important to your customers, is knowing what their costs are going to be in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Waters.
Thank you, Tony. Good question. And one more, before we move on, and Diane, your hand was up.
Thank you very much. This was really helpful. And have we lost Mr. Dalton? Oh, there you are. Okay. I'm wondering, are any of the emerging opportunities also coupling opportunities with the aquaculture industry? And I recognize there are significant sort of impacts and questions involving the natural fisheries, but are people doing that at the front end or at the back end?
I guess I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. So there's one way to answer it in terms of aquaculture, in terms of, we're seeing this in tidal, where they're developing tidal to basically provide energy for aquaculture farms. Yeah. But I'm thinking, is that what you're, is that?
Well, actually, we're doing that already here in New Hampshire, but I'm wondering, as I understand it, there are some operations in Europe that are putting aquaculture pens that are attached to the offshore turbine structures. And it's an additional resource for the fishing community to sort of get involved in aquaculture. And I'm wondering, is that something that states are considering at the front end?
I haven't heard any consideration of that in terms of the US states that I'm familiar with, but I'm more of an expert in terms of the US than Europe.
Thank you.
Well, what an interesting question. And John, again, thank you so very much. And I hope that we'll be able to maybe someday actually to officially use your services as a consultant down the road, because you've been so generous with your time so far. So let's move on to the last part of our agenda. And I'm going to try to screen share here. If this is gonna work, maybe. So Michael and I think, are gonna tag team on this, but let me just set this up a little bit. You were sent the document earlier today, and I know it's a lot to go over, but I did want us to have an opportunity to get a first look at this. First off, I want to thank Michael and John and representatives Eversource and of the industry, and Senator Bradley in particular, and Senator Perkins Quokka, and really quite a few others who have had some meetings over the last several weeks to think about what might be right for renewable energy procurement for New Hampshire. And just as the kind of 40,000 foot level of this, it does seem to me that with the other New England states doing procurement, that the argument, which has been made for a long time, that this might be a very useful strategy for New Hampshire to help attract the industry here, and whatever the renewable energy goals may be related to the state, but that in terms of offshore wind, that it would become increasingly difficult perhaps for us as a state to have the economic advantage of the industry if it were not coupled with the tool of potential procurement. And so what we did was look pretty closely at what the other states were doing. And if you're familiar with this kind of legislation, you're going to see what I hope was good portions of selecting parts from what Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island have done. And in part because this is the process of those bills was one that was participated in by Eversource and the other utilities that are familiar with the region and are working under these procurement regimes in other states, but also trying to think about what is right for us in the process that we do things. So again, at the high level, what the language does here, and I just to say, I'd hope to before sharing it, have a draft from the Office of Legislative Services, but they are very jammed up, and the State House has been closed again, and so forth. Because the language that I have here is what I submitted to the Office of Legislative Services, like 10 days or more ago, and we still don't have a draft. So people understand this is going to look very, very differently after the drafting attorneys have put it into the kind of language and reference to state statute that it should have. So my apologies for that, but I thought that it was really important to, before this went much further, to have the opportunity to have the commission take a look at it. And also to note that the legislative process will be that the Senate is not going to start committee hearings until around February 1st. And so then for the next month and a half, there'll be hearings, and this bill will be worked on through the Senate, and certainly working with the governor and others through that process before it goes over to the House. So there will be multiple opportunities for the commission and individuals on it and other interested individuals to weigh in through that legislative process. So in terms of overall what the bill does, and again, it's quite similar to what other states have done, is that it offers some definitions of the kind of energy that we're looking at, and offshore, and it looks at a procurement process that is set up through a committee that would put out requests for proposals under certain criteria, review them, and select proposals that the utilities would then take to the PUC after review by the Attorney General, and then that process there as well. It sets a general number of 800 megawatts, which might be procured, and it does indicate that some of that may be for the other classes of renewable energy, so that Senator Bradley particularly wanted to have the large bucket here of the possibility of hydro and biomass, which are of great interest to him, and of course solar is of interest to many as well. So you'll see that those are mentioned here as well, but the main purpose of the bill is to get us involved with the offshore wind. We've seen from John's presentation what every place what other states are doing, and the interest of trying to ensure that the industry sees us as a player and wants to use our facilities. The 800 megawatts is that, I feel like the three bears, is it, too much or too little or just about right. And, it's a number that people seem comfortable with. I thought about it as, this is not the end of perhaps for procurement for New Hampshire, but that judging on the size of our market and our needs and the size of the state compared to the others, it seemed to be kind of comparable there. And then, Michael, why don't I pause here for a moment and let you say a few words, if you'd like to, before we go into some of the details of the bill.
Sure, I'll jump in real quick. I think that was a great encapsulation of how we've approached this. The one thing that I would add is something that John had noted earlier in his presentation, was in terms of the industry and sort of what they're used to, especially in the US. These procurement efforts are really the starting point for their involvement in really gaining their attention, and also creating that scenario of the economic development piece. And certainly there will likely be opportunities, whether procurement of a substantial amount from offshore wind is realized or not. The real impact comes in what has been witnessed, I would say, in other jurisdictions, when you do put this kind of a stake in the ground and say, we really want to maximize the benefit of this industry to the state, and to that point of rates as well moving forward, anticipating that these are going to be lower rates. I think there's just a multitude of potential benefits that we can witness through this particular process. And so as you noted, Senator, this is kind of the first crack at it. We've tried to learn a lot of lessons, talk to a lot of people to this point to make sure that we are on target with something that can be workable for New Hampshire. But with that, I think it's probably best, and probably people are interested in launching into some of the language at this point.
Yeah, and so Michael, perhaps I will start to scroll down through here, and I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to try to get in a presentation like this to get too far down in the weeds. It's really for the information of the members of the commission, and please, people, feel free to just shout out and jump in as we're going through, and we'll have a lot of opportunity to talk about this in the future, and you can share this with your colleagues. And again, understanding that it's not until we get some drafted language, and there'll certainly be redrafts, that it's going to look anything like what it should. But it just at least gives a sense of what we're looking at, what New Hampshire might do. So aside from some definitions there, then when we get down to procurement, what you'll see is set up as a structure, this Renewable Energy Procurement Committee, which is told to solicit proposals not later than June 30th, 2022, and that this committee would, again, upon approval of the governor, select these proposals for energy distribution company submission to the Public Utilities Commission. The bold and underlined "upon approval of the governor" are just in that form because these were recent additions at the suggestion of Senator Bradley, which I just thought made just absolute sense. And so it's in a form that was then sent back to Office of Legislative Services to add these to what I had sent them earlier. So, then the solicitation methods are outlined, and in that paragraph, it's note that it say that it may be just New Hampshire or coordinated and issued jointly with other New England states within ISO New England or entities designated by those states, and it can be a staggered procurement schedule. Some states, say no less than this or no less than that in a single one, but I thought giving the flexibility here, particularly because it was pointed out that, let's say there's a very, very large procurement that is being brought forward, we might be able to grab 100 megawatts or a couple hundred megawatts out of it at a very, very good price. So that's why we didn't say that it should be no more than 2 procurements or all done in one or so on.
Senator Waters, can I ask a question?
Yep.
And hopefully this is an appropriate time. It seems that there's been a lot of movement within the state of Maine regarding offshore wind and procurement just in the past month. Is this document sort of consistent with efforts that are going on at Maine? Do we need to be mindful of timing? Can somebody offer some insights?
Well, maybe Michael can. I'm aware of what Maine has done, but I wasn't exactly sure whether it really influenced the kind of shape of what we were putting together. But Michael, do you have some thoughts about that, or John?
Yeah, certainly. I'll jump in real quick first. And John, if you've got any other updates in terms of Maine and what you've been seeing, certainly feel free to add. Yeah, Diana, it's a fantastic question because Maine has really jumped out aggressively in trying to prepare themselves for really seeing as much industry involvement and development as possible. There have been a couple of items specifically. One, an economic development agency grant of $2.1 million that the state received to develop a roadmap around offshore wind. That RFP has gone out and is kind of an interesting read to see how they're approaching it. A lot of community involvement, a lot of community outreach and stakeholder outreach, but obviously a substantial amount of money to go towards helping to determine the best approach forward for them. We have considered and talked about a similar effort with the federal EDA, but we're hoping that some additional resources from Washington do start to come forward with this new administration and the way that they're approaching clean energy. In addition, there have been two other significant announcements. One in regards to the Aquaventus project, which is a floating technology out of the University of Maine that did receive through private investment $100 million as part of that pilot project that will start to occur over the next several years. And then finally, in terms of an announcement regarding a research area that, again, is focused on floating wind and an engagement with the fishing community. That also is a very interesting approach where I'm not entirely sure how to read that yet because it's starting to kind of somewhat subvert the BOEM task force process where these systems would be connected to the grid in delivering electricity. And that's a bit quick when we've really only had one meeting so far of the BOEM task force, regional task force. But all of those are indications that, Maine is really trying to spearhead the Gulf of Maine development. Within this particular bill, we've sort of purposely attempted to avoid putting any language that would indicate any level of separation, but to the contrary, have tried to leave it broad enough that New Hampshire can participate with Maine on any level of procurement. I don't know how much language within this would be necessary in order to facilitate that. I think there's more of a need on the state side to begin conversations to kind of engage a bit more with the state of Maine and for that matter with the state of Massachusetts. So I think,
I think, Diane, that part of my sense is that, much of what Maine is doing is quite specific to Maine. And that for us, we're looking at procurement right now. The economic development piece is something that Commissioner Caswell and others, and we've talked to the federal delegation, and it's not that it's entirely separate from procurement, obviously, but that there are many tracks that New Hampshire needs to move forward on. But again, I'm not, Maine has a particular reason to do what it's doing, and we are not in that position in some ways to do what they're doing, and maybe nor should we, but it's something, it's an excellent question. And as Michael was concluding there, I think that what's going to be awfully important here is how the three governors start to engage each other. And I think that needs to happen. And knowing Governor Sunnu's interest in protecting and promoting economic interests in New Hampshire, I think we're likely to, see some thoughts in that direction too. We can do what we can do as a legislature, but we're not the only player on it. So let me continue on here. There's some language about the levelized prices and pricing and so on. And then there's some schedule language as to the process of moving forward to the Public Utilities Commission. And then where I have here is some language that you will see repeated below, trying to set some criteria for the selection process here, and what should be, looked at, and factors and considerations. And we can talk about those in some detail when we get a little bit further down to the PUC there. And then some language here that and remuneration to the distribution companies, some that this costs of seek recovery of transmission costs from federal sources, that there that there be some funding for the activities of the RAPC committee, which is clearly going to need a consultant and to help do its work. And then I'll just go down now to the PUC evaluation criteria, energy reliability, just and reasonable price, reducing winter electricity price spikes, cost effective to electric ratepayers in New Hampshire, avoid line loss and mitigate transmission costs, commercially reasonable, long-term contracts, energy delivery in winter months, demonstrate capacity to produce. And then I thought it was also important even here, although BOEM will be dealing with much of the environmental and fisheries and other things, that to place here as well, that for the REPC and for the PUC, I wanted to have in here the wildlife, natural resources, ecosystems, fisheries, and also diversity for the supply, and then also the labor, attention to fair negotiation of contracts with labor down there.
Senator Waters?
Yep, please do jump in, Sherry.
Hi, thank you. I was just, albeit I haven't read through this in detail yet, but I did, of course, focus in on those couple paragraphs in regards to the natural resources and commercial and recreational interests. And I don't know if Gino also wants to jump in on this conversation, but it's also important to consider transit lanes.
I'm sorry, couldn't I hear that, Sherry?
It's also important to consider transit lanes.
Yes, okay.
Gino would have a different view of transit lanes than the commercial fisheries. It's just as important for the commercial fisheries to assure direct transit lanes where they don't have to necessarily go around large fields. And that may disrupt their fishing activity and their viability.
Thank you for that. I will add that at the appropriate spot. It'd be good to specify that here, wouldn't it?
That's my suggestion, but I'll also let Gino weigh in if he's still with us.
Yes, that's a good point, Cherie. There's been a lot of work done, Senator, on in the Ocean Planning Department, using the data from the AIS on ships and tanks, tank barges. And so there's a lot of that information that's available to provide safe, specific transit lanes, like going into Portland and Boston, you have the vessel separation traffic zones. So that's something that really should be looked at, because especially coming into New Hampshire waters, there are some ships that because of their draft have to come in from the east, and other ships that because of their draft, they can come up from south of the Isles of Shoals. So those approaches are important to take into consideration.
So I guess that the appropriate place here would be in this Roman lower 9. I'll put that in there. Okay.
I'll just point out real too quick that in terms of some of the issues, we did struggle a little bit with what to include in this and what we know will most likely be covered within the BOEM task force process. And so we certainly don't want to duplicate and also, just stay within what we think we're capable of providing for some resource as well. So we'll probably look to BOEM as well to kind of help with any of those issues. And so if something wasn't included, it's not necessarily purposeful by any means. It is more related to the fact that we know BOEM within the scope of their work will likely provide a lot of guidance and answers to that.
And to Michael's point, the legislative language for this commission says that we are advisory to BOEM, so that in a sense, what we put in here is in this legislation as it goes forward is a directive in some ways to BOEM that here's what we think at this point in time ought to be included in their consideration. We only have a few more minutes left, so let me skip down a little ways to renewable energy credits, and you'll see that there's quite a bit of flexibility there as to how they are used, which I thought would be advantageous to couch them in this way. Then let's go down to this establishment of this procurement committee. And I think it's important to keep this rather small and close. And again, it is signaling to the governor that the governor really does control this process because he will appoint the chair. There'll be commission members, and then another appointee, and then a representative of labor and the consumer advocate. So, then it asks the REPC to potentially coordinate in other areas and select these proposals. And again, I thought it was important here to have provision about labor here. I mean, this really will come down to what's done in the contracts and other places, but I thought it was important to have that here. And then I will add down here the transit lanes also in this paragraph about which is kind of duplicative of the language before. Let me write myself a note. And it calls for the use of an independent evaluator for this process in the REPC to be contracted with to evaluating the proposals. There will be an opportunity for public input. And the REPC will report to the governor and to us. And then finally, the last one is that there should be a report every other year, just so that we kind of know what really are the energy needs, what is the growth of electric demand, just snapshots because these are long-term contracts as to how the bigger picture looks and what impact that has on what is being done for energy procurement. So again, thank you folks for bearing with me. Michael, did you want to add anything that I may have missed in this all too fast summary?
I think that was a good summary, and I'm sure people get a chance to kind of dig in a little bit more, but I think that sounded great.
And we would have a couple of minutes for questions. Again, this just starts a process. I wanted to get it before the commission, but are there some questions now? Any further questions? The smell test as well.
Hey, Senator, this is Ted Deers. I have a quick question, and maybe I don't understand how sort of all of the economics on this work, but just my real quick question is, what's to cause this to actually stimulate the development of new offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine rather than somebody from Massachusetts waters, Rhode Island waters, or the Bight of New York, or maybe even Connecticut offshore to purchase into to procure using this? I mean, what I guess I'm just maybe I'm missing the point here a little bit in that what is it that would stimulate this to buy new offshore wind as opposed to offshore wind that may be created somewhere else?
Well, that's a good question. And you'll note that it is agnostic on where this offshore wind comes from, and that at least 600 megawatts. And I thought that was important because our project is quite a few years out, right?
Right, yeah.
And so little old New Hampshire is not in and of itself going to expedite the construction in the Gulf of Maine. Those are much harder decisions, but it gives us an opportunity to, I think my feeling is that we can start attracting industry now. That the folks that are creating a supply chain and even before we get to construction, that they're getting maxed out in some of the port facilities in southern New England. We have a lot of suppliers up here who might contribute to the supply chain and manufacturing, and so that this will enhance our participation so that when it does come to the Gulf of Maine, we have an opportunity to get even more of that business. So it's a good question, and I thought that in some ways that if we wait until the Gulf of Maine power is available, we'll just have missed the boat, I think. So that'd be my answer to that good question. Michael, did you want to add to that, or?
No, I think that was perfect. I think the only other item is that, there's really no requirement either to move forward in particular procurements. It's really the process that's being created within this to evaluate and to be able to have the opportunity and to help target that industry specifically. And since John is still on, I don't know if John, if you had any other potential response for Ted.
I mean, clearly that's a policy question. And that is one thing to think about is, I would agree with the senator that it is important, to get moving soon if you're going to capture these economic benefits. The industry is making decisions, locational decisions now. So waiting for 6 years, I think that much of the industry will be, well under development, and some of the critical decisions will have been made. Obviously, if the Gulf of Maine were available for development in 2 years' time, that would be ideal. But obviously, that's unrealistic.
Well, thank you, folks. And we are at our time. And so I do want to invite public comment if there is someone who wishes to make a public comment. And I'm not exactly sure because we don't have our staff person with us how to do that. Michael, would you have a sense of?
Yeah, just raising hands again. If anybody in the public on the call right now.
Well, I can do that now. Yes, I see. Okay, so if anybody on the call, the public would like to ask a question, you could raise your hand now. Okay, Sue again, go right ahead.
Hi,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Susan, yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks. Just sort of to follow up on the question of if we're looking at the Gulf of Maine, it's important to think about the extent to which that development would be in deeper water, which would mean floating technology, which at least in the time frame we're talking about would be substantially more expensive. So again, to the senator's point that looking at the lowest cost offshore wind, it would be important probably to be open to projects in the existing lease areas.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Good point. And I think we're going to be amazed at how quickly the floating technology changes and the costs come down as more projects are going to be using it, but we shall see. So I don't see any others. And again, thank you, everybody. Here we are, the holiday week coming up, and I think it's been a great meeting. Thanks again to Gino and to Enter John. Oh, I do see another raised hand. Excuse me. And Raphael, go right ahead.
I think I've unmuted now. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Senator Waters, for your leadership, and everybody else for the activity here on the commission. I really appreciate that. I was listening actively. I may have missed, though, the next meeting of the commission. Has that been set?
It should be the third Monday. Am I right, Michael?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay,
Third
good.
Monday is Martin Luther King Day. So can we move forward?
So we will be, we'll have to figure that out.
Got it. I'll stay tuned. How is there outside of the New Hampshire sort of meeting notification process, is there other ways to stay tuned in on when these virtual meetings are being held?
Yes, I mean, these are always going to be posted in the New Hampshire Senate calendar. And we hope before too long to have a website for the commission, which will also have those scheduled meetings. But unless it's something like Martin Luther King Day, assume it's going to be the third Monday of each month.
Got it. Thank you. And then finally, may I ask for a copy of what you displayed, just so that I could? I've never seen it before. I was just curious to see perhaps a little bit greater detail what's in there than what you shared on the screen.
Raphael, if you'd like to email me, I will do so. But just the caveat is that this is going to look a whole lot different.
I'm well aware, and I appreciate that.
And also, you can bet there's going to be some amending going on. But
oh yeah, absolutely, to be expected.
It's a public meeting. It's not a public document, so I'd be happy to send you it as an attachment. So
right. Do you mind throwing up your email again? I saw there was a Sen Waters, I think, and then you also have your at the state New Hampshire one. So I wasn't sure quite.
The state of New Hampshire one is for official business.
Got it.
So if you would, and we're going to have to close the public comment now because we do have to conclude. And so I will make a motion to adjourn. And
one real quick thing for everybody on the commission that's still on. We did want to try and do some commission planning. Obviously, we can't do it today. You'd received a list of items, I believe, at our last meeting. We're going to follow up with that just so that we can make sure that the members are also providing input into what we're focusing on next. We do want to make sure that everyone is involved and given those topics. And so what we'll do is probably send those out again. Please provide some feedback if you have any thoughts around what the next scheduled topic should be. And then we can work on putting together some presenters around those issues. So.
Very good. So now I guess, Michael, I'm going to take that as a second of for the motion to adjourn. Okay.
Sure.
And Mark, if you could read our roll, please, so we can vote to adjourn. Thank you.
Give me a second. For some reason, my word, luckily I saved everything, but my word kind of crashed on me. So give me 1 second here. All right, here we go. And as you can hear, I am no longer alone in my house in Candia. I have 2 kids at home. So, all right. And so Senator Waters.
Yes.
Michael Behrman.
Yes.
Representative Bolio.
Yes.
Representative Harvey.
Yes.
Representative Somsich.
Yes.
Ted Deers.
Yes.
Chris Williams.
Yes.
Jerry Patterson.
Yes.
Gino Marconi.
Yes.
Diane Foster.
Yes.
John Clancy.
Yes.
Jim Tatone. Jim, unmute. Can we go? Okay, his mouthing says yes. Tony Ginta.
Yes.
Glenn Brackett. He looks like he left. Vanden Devadia. Looks like he left. Oh no, yep. And I will say yes, and let's get out of here.